My name is Rebecca Cole, and if there's one thing I've learned after decades in rooms without windows, under ceilings that hummed with static and secrets, it's that power rarely wears a name tag. I was 42 the night I walked into my 20-year high school reunion, wearing a navy blue dress I bought off the clearance rack at a DC consignment store. It wasn't about fashion, it was about memory. That dress had been folded under a combat jacket in an Afghan bunker. I once briefed NATO in it, but tonight, it made me invisible. And that, as always, was the point. The valet barely looked at me. My heels clicked across the polished stone like they didn't belong. I murmured a quiet thank you, clutch tucked under one arm, the other adjusting the sleeve that still hid my West Point ring. The lobby of Aspen Grove Resort shimmered like Versailles on a budget overlit chandeliers. Gold-edged everything, mirrors angled just so. The kind of place built to impress the insecure. I could already hear the laughter behind the ballroom doors, the pop of champagne corks, clinking glasses, the kind of performative joy that lives just above the murmur of backhanded compliments. A concierge handed me a name tag in basic serif font, Rebecca Cole. No honorific, no title, no weight. Chloe's touch, no doubt. Inside, the main ballroom was a theater of status. Long banquet tables draped in ivory, centerpieces dripping with fake crystals, a 6-tier cake positioned like a wedding altar. On the far wall, a screen flashed a slideshow of high school memories. Debate team, prom, the DC class trip. Chloe was in nearly half the photos. I was in 3. Always in the background, always half-shadowed. My younger sister, Chloe Cole, stood on stage in a blood-red sheath dress that practically bled ambition. Her voice cut through the room with polished ease. And after 15 years at the Department of Justice, I'm proud to share I've just been appointed Deputy Director of Western Cyber Oversight. Applause, hair toss, a little shrug to feign modesty. But I'll never forget where it all started right here at Jefferson High. Cue sentiment, cue the pause. And of course, she smiled just wide enough. I have to thank my sister, Rebecca, who's with us tonight, for always being uniquely herself. Chuckles, a few polite claps. An older man raised his glass like he wasn't sure why. The subtext wasn't lost on me. That was Chloe's true gift, weaponizing praise with surgical precision. I scanned the seating chart. My name was taped to table 14 way in the back, near the kitchen doors and buffet trays. The front tables were embossed in gold: Dr. Hartman, Senator Gill, CEO Wong, Chloe Cole. I found my seat next to a half-eaten shrimp cocktail and a plate of congealed scalloped potatoes. Across the room, a familiar voice slid into my ear like a splinter. "Becca," he smirked. "Jason Hart, still tall, still tan, still smug." I turned slowly. Jason. He looked me up and down. Glass of scotch in hand, still stationed in the desert. "Or are you pushing paper somewhere in Kansas now?" I smiled tightly. "Nice to see you too." "Come on, I'm joking," he said, laughing at his own cleverness. "But seriously, you studied pre-law, didn't you? What happened?" Before I could answer, a woman in pearls leaned toward another guest, loud enough for me to hear. "Didn't she drop out of law school? Shame. So much potential." Melissa Young, seated 3 tables away, caught my eye. A faint smile. Maybe pity. Maybe solidarity. Probably both. The room buzzed with success stories. Waiters poured more wine. Someone toasted to old friends and new fortunes. Chloe did a round of theatrical hugs. All teeth and rehearsed warmth. She stopped at my table. "Oh, Becca," she beamed. "Glad you made it. I almost didn't recognize you in that navy vintage." "It's just a dress," I said. "Well, you always were. Practical." She tilted her head. "We really should catch up sometime. I'm sure you've got stories. Only the quiet ones, I replied. Jason returned, this time with a flock of former classmates. One of them, a woman in a powder blue pantsuit, squinted at me. Wait, weren't you in the army? That's right. You left sophomore year to enlist or something. A guy behind her barked a laugh. Army, so what? Like a clerk, mailroom sergeant. Several heads turned. Jason smirked. Chloe said nothing. I took a sip of water. The glass trembled slightly in my hand, but I held it. What they saw in nobody in a discount dress. What they missed, I had once sat across from generals and given them briefings they still couldn't sleep through. I stood, adjusted the sleeve hiding my ring, met their eyes one by one. Something like that, I said quietly, and walked straight out to the balcony, past the LED chandelier, past the poster of the Golden Trio from our class year, past the name tags that shimmered and titles that bloated. The air outside was clean, too clean. The wind curled around me like it was trying to listen. That was when my phone buzzed, a soft, coded vibration, encrypted channel. But before I could respond, I heard the door behind me hiss open. Becca, Jason said, halfway through another scotch, you always did like standing on the edge of things. I didn't respond. He leaned beside me, too close, reeking of entitlement and wood smoke cologne. His voice dipped lower. You really used to have a future. You know, debate team, valedictorian track, Harvard Law practically had your name on it. And then poof, Army. He laughed. Same laugh. Same tone from the night I told him I'd accepted West Point. Bigger than me. I had said then. Yeah, he'd snapped. Bigger than us. Then he walked away. No calls. No goodbyes. Now, 2 decades later, he stood beside me, older but not wiser. I didn't disappear, I said. I just stopped explaining myself. He scoffed. You always did like cryptic answers. I turned to go. He caught my arm, gentle, but firm. You could have been someone. I looked him dead in the eye. I am someone. Just not someone you'd recognize. And then click. The door opened again. Jason Chloe's voice, sugar-laced and performative. They're asking for the Golden Trio photo. Come on for old time's sake. Her eyes landed on me. Oh, Becca, didn't realize you were still here. Thought you'd ducked out early, like usual. She looped her arm through Jason's like it belonged there. A glance at his lapel, a touch to smooth his jacket. Everyone's dying to know what DOJ's latest appointee and the city's hottest real estate mogul are up to. Told them you two were still fighting over who gets the power couple crown. Jason chuckled. Awkward now, unsure where this performance ended. Chloe's smile tightened. And what about you? Rebecca, still somewhere, hot. I'm in transition, I said simply. Oh, she tilted her head. Not out of work, I hope. I manage fine, I said. Just not from behind podiums. She laughed lightly, always so mysterious. And with that, she turned, heels clicking like punctuation marks. They walked back inside. I stayed. The wind pressed against me like it wanted me to say something, but I'd said enough. Because what they never noticed was what I carried. And tonight, the case in my hotel room had already begun to hum. Next, the past may have dressed in red, but the future arrives in silence. And this time, it's encrypted. The balcony was quiet, but inside, the room roared louder than ever. I stood alone, watching the silhouettes behind frosted glass move in choreographed laughter. Chloe with her hand on Jason's arm. Someone pointing at the slideshow. A round of applause. I could almost predict the cadence now toast. Sip, laugh, spotlight, repeat. That balcony felt colder than it should have, but I welcomed the bite. It grounded me, reminded me that I was still real. Even if this version of me, this invisible version, had no place cards or photo ops inside. I leaned against the rail and let my eyes follow the manicured slope of the golf course just below. Everything was trimmed, polished, quiet, controlled. Exactly how they liked it. When I finally went back inside, the ballroom had shifted into its second act after dinner mingling. Smaller clusters, looser tongues, more liquor. I navigated between clusters of familiar faces made strange by Botox and bravado. I caught glimpses of people I hadn't thought about in years. Some had gray around the temples. Some had new last names on their tags. Some looked like they'd spent the last 2 decades climbing. Others looked like they'd spent it apologizing for never starting. Melissa Young stood near the bar. Nursing a glass of wine, she caught my eye again, and this time, she waved me over. "That was painful," she said quietly. I raised an eyebrow. "Which part?" She tilted her glass toward the crowd. "All of it." We both laughed, not out of joy, but relief. It felt good to share the silence with someone who didn't need to fill it. "You look better than all of them," she added. I doubt they'd agree. Doesn't matter. Truth doesn't need a majority vote. God, I'd missed her. Melissa had always been one of the few who didn't measure people by GPA, dress size, or whose arm you were hanging on. We weren't close back then, but she'd seen through Chloe's charm before I ever could admit it was all an act. Across the room, Chloe was leaning into Jason again, laughing too loud, holding his wrist as if she owned it. When she caught me watching, she didn't look away. She smiled, slow, sharp, calculated. Melissa followed my gaze. Didn't she used to follow you around like a shadow? She learned to outshine me instead. Before she could respond, I felt a hand on my shoulder. A gentle touch, warm but hesitant. I turned. "Mr. Walters." He looked older, of course, grayer, thinner, but the eyes were the same sharp, kind, quietly dangerous in the best way. The kind of teacher who made you fall in love with history without realizing he was teaching you how to question power. "Miss Cole," he said with that same crooked half-smile I remembered from surprise quizzes. "I was hoping you'd be here. I heard about your service." I nodded. "Thank you, sir." "You wrote a paper for me once," he said. "Asymmetric warfare and political memory. I still remember it. Brilliant work." I blinked. That paper had been written in the back of a bus. The night after Jason had ghosted me for good. It was rage-inked, grief-saturated. I never thought anyone even read it. "I remember," I said softly. He leaned in, his voice dropping an octave. "Tell me," he murmured, eyes narrowing. "Did you ever serve under Ghost Viper? I've heard things." My breath caught. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. His gaze softened. "They never see it, do they?" he said. "The real ones never get the parade." And just like that, I felt seen. Not for what I wore or who I sat with, but for what I'd carried. Alone. For years. "Some of us remember," he added, then disappeared into the crowd like a ghost slipping back into the archives. I turned, letting my fingers trace the edge of a crystal glass. The hum of the room blurred into static again. Chloe was giving another speech. Jason laughed on cue. I drifted back toward my table, table 14, next to the buffet and behind a floral monstrosity. That's when I saw it. A photo frame lying face down beside the projector station. Something about it felt off. I picked it up. Inside, a faded class photo from junior year. Everyone in rows, arms linked, smiles frozen, Chloe at the center, Jason beside her, me. There I was, far edge, half-shadowed, caught mid-blink, the only one not touching anyone. But what chilled me wasn't the placement. It was the back of the frame. Someone, probably the event planner, had scribbled to be removed, not Chloe's final pick. I stared at those words for a long moment. Then I set the frame upright on the table. No drama, no announcement. Just reclamation. Later. I sat near the exit, watching people drift in and out. Melissa had gone home. Mr. Walters had disappeared. Even Jason was off somewhere, probably trying to remember if charm worked the same way after your third drink. I checked my phone. The encrypted ping had come from Geneva, time-stamped 3 hours ago. Only 2 words. Project Merlin breach suspected. My pulse didn't spike. My breathing stayed steady. It wasn't fear. It was instinct. A muscle memory honed over years in shadow rooms and quiet flights. I slipped out without fanfare, the ballroom still aglow behind me. My room at the resort was on the corner, secluded. Strategic. I locked the door, turned on the white noise machine to muffle sound. Dimmable lights, curtains drawn. Underneath my garment bag, tucked into a discreet corner of the closet, was a matte black hardshell case. No logos, no locks. Just 3 recessed ports. Finger scan, retinal ID, voice print. Cole, Rebecca. Clearance Echo 5. A soft chime. The interior glowed blue, and the screen lit up. Project Merlin. Status breach detected. Priority escalated. I stared at the map overlay. A red marker pulsed in San Jose. A secondary alert in Warsaw. My dress still smelled like champagne and powder, but underneath it all, the past was knocking again. And this time, I wasn't answering as a forgotten name tag. I was answering as the one holding the codes. Next, I didn't come back for the cake or the nostalgia. I came because something was slipping, and the source might be standing under a spotlight named Chloe. I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed in that same navy blue dress, knees together, elbows on thighs, staring at the screen on the open black case. The glow of Project Merlin danced over the walls like a silent alarm, quiet, controlled, deadly. Breach detected, San Jose, Warsaw, crosslink anomaly. I'd been out of active fieldwork for 18 months. My reassignment to strategic consultancy was supposed to mean no more midnight runs, no more cut cable hotel phones or burner sims. But Merlin wasn't just any operation. It was the backbone of decentralized U.S. cyber intel, the kind of program that didn't show up on budgets or memos. And right now, it was blinking red. I reached for the secure tablet in the side pouch. My fingers moved automatically. Swipe, scan, decrypt. The interface opened with a soft beep. 3 user IDs had pinged the server cluster in Poland simultaneously. One of them was mine, which should have been impossible. I hadn't logged in from that sector in nearly 2 years. The other 2 was a ghost alias flagged as Archer X. The last was encrypted under a DOJ backdoor clearance. Chloe. I stood slowly. The chill hit first, not from the air conditioning, but from something deeper. The kind that settles into your spine when intuition becomes evidence, when doubt hardens into data. Chloe had always been ambitious. She made no apologies for wanting the top seat at any table, but backdooring a black-budget program tied to NATO intel grids, that wasn't ambition. That was treason. I exhaled, steady, low. Everything inside me wanted to burst out of that hotel room and confront her face to face. But I wasn't that girl anymore, the one who let people define the battleground. I had learned to move differently, quiet, precise. There were still hours until sunrise, but I knew the reunion's golden brunch would be the next performance, mimosas and legacy talk. A room full of people who thought they were important, while the real story played out in the shadows just behind them. I changed into black slacks, a gray blouse, flat shoes, not military, not civilian, just invisible enough. The case slid back under the bed. The tablet came with me. I moved through the empty corridors of Aspen Grove like a ghost. Downstairs, the hotel business center was closed, but I still remembered how to bypass a touchscreen lock. Old habits. The fluorescent lighting buzzed faintly overhead as I slid into a booth, logged in to a mirrored node of the Merlin interface. I uploaded a false IP mask, looped my signal through Oslo, then back through a Canadian university. Then I waited. 15 seconds. Then ping. Someone was watching the same node I was. I tracked the reflection. They had a tighter latency than I expected. That meant proximity. Within 100 miles. Maybe closer. The DOJ access signature matched Chloe's regional credential stamp, Western Cyber Oversight Division. Her team. I pushed deeper. And then, like a rotten core hidden inside a polished apple, I found the data leak. Small, elegant, deliberate. It had started 3 months ago, a pattern of cross-jurisdictional info siphoning, disguised as performance testing. Targeted, selective. Names of mid-level agents, relay tower schedules, a new AI mapping initiative out of Zurich. None of it seemed big alone. But together, a mosaic of national vulnerabilities. A click, then another. I recognized the signature of Archer X again. A ghost protocol I'd once embedded myself meant for failsafes in case a team was compromised. I'd buried it in encrypted redundancy layers. Only 3 people ever knew it existed. I was one. The second was now dead. The third had no clearance for it. Unless they'd stolen mine. Someone had accessed my ghost profile from inside a DOJ relay 6 weeks ago, which meant Chloe didn't just know about Merlin. She had reached into my life, into my classified past, and she had made it hers. I leaned back in the chair, let the weight of it all sink in. This wasn't about sibling rivalry anymore. This was a power play using bloodlines and reputation to access something she didn't earn. And she was leveraging me to do it. The feeling that rushed in wasn't just betrayal. It was disgust. I thought back to that photo, the one she'd tried to have removed, me standing on the edge, literally and figuratively, cropped out of her story, forgotten. Maybe she thought if she stole the parts of me that mattered, my past, my protocols, even my ghost alias, I'd disappear. But she forgot something. Ghosts don't fade. They haunt. And some of them carry files. Just as I prepared to shut everything down, a new message flashed across the screen. Meet me, 6:45 a.m., East Deck, come alone. Sender. Unknown. But the encryption handshake was familiar. Melissa. Only someone with field tier encryption access could have initiated that handshake. She wasn't just a teacher now. She had clearance. Or she had help. I closed the tablet, heart thudding. Maybe I wasn't the only one here playing invisible. And maybe, just maybe, this wasn't just about Chloe anymore. Next, the woman who once sat 3 rows behind me in English class just called a classified meetup. I was no longer the only ghost at the reunion. At exactly 6:41 a.m., I stepped onto the east deck of Aspen Grove Resort. The sky was painted in quiet pastels, pale peach bleeding into soft gray. Morning mist rolled over the treetops like breath on glass. This early, the world felt half-formed, like something was waiting to be decided. The deck was empty except for one figure, seated cross-legged on a wooden bench beneath a canopy of vines. Melissa Jung. No wineglass this time, no reunion name tag. She wore a windbreaker zipped to the chin, sneakers, and a calm that didn't quite match the storm I knew had started churning last night. She didn't stand as I approached, just looked up, her eyes sharper than I remembered from the ballroom. Less apology, more intent. "You came," she said. "You called." Melissa nodded, then glanced toward the trees, as if scanning for movement. I knew the look. A preemptive assessment civilian body. Trained instincts. That sealed it. "You're not just teaching English Lit in Connecticut," I said quietly. "No," she replied, voice even. "And you're not just attending a reunion." She pulled something from her pocket and handed it to me, a slim USB key. disguised as a charm from a Pandora bracelet. I intercepted it 3 weeks ago, she said. Backdoor scrape from DOJ Western Cyber. Pinged 3 of our buried ghost aliases. Yours was one. My hand tightened around the charm. You're with Hisha, I murmured. Homeland embedded surveillance and intel access. You went deep ops. Melissa smirked. I told you I didn't just disappear. I sat beside her. The silence held a different tension now, one between allies with too many layers of secrets. Why now, I asked. Why reveal this? She tilted her head. Because your sister is playing with weapons she doesn't understand. Because the breach originated from someone using your encrypted legacy codes. And because I trust you'll know how to end it without blowing up the entire department. I looked at her. She's trying to activate Merlin, I said. She already has. Melissa turned toward me, her voice barely above a whisper. Rebecca, this isn't just about intelligence leaks or power grabs. Merlin's not just a project anymore. It's a strategic initiative AI linked to active control nodes across Europe. Whoever owns it during activation controls satellite disruption protocols. I froze. That's beyond her clearance. She forged it. Melissa said, built an alias shell under your retired handler ID. She's been simulating secure tests for months under the guise of threat modeling. Her new DOJ post gave her just enough autonomy to get under the radar. I closed my eyes, bile rising in my throat. My ring, the one I'd worn for decades, as a quiet symbol of service, felt heavier now, tainted. Chloe hadn't just stolen from me. She had used my past like a stolen identity. And now, she was on the edge of weaponizing it. I need access to the DOJ's local uplink, I said. The one she's rerouted for Merlin's shadow node. Melissa pulled a burner phone from her jacket and slid it over. Already spoofed. It'll get you past the second-tier firewall. And the rest? That's up to you, but you've got until 11:00 a.m. After that, Merlin goes into self-replication mode. It'll generate its own admin core untraceable, autonomous, which meant one thing if Chloe got full control. Even I wouldn't be able to shut it down. I stood, the plan forming fast. I'll need to be inside the brunch. Melissa grinned. I thought you'd say that. She pulled a garment bag from under the bench and handed it to me. Inside a slate gray sheath dress. Clean, sleek, high neckline, no frills, just power. And this I asked. Her smile faded slightly. Consider it armor. By 9:00 a.m., the reunion brunch was in full swing. Round tables spread across the lawn, white umbrellas, smooth jazz playing from hidden speakers. Chloe worked the crowd with the finesse of a seasoned politician. Jason was never far from her, playing the well-groomed trophy. Laughter floated through the air like pollen light. Showy, irritating. I walked through it all like I belonged. No one noticed at first. Prototype interface from DOJ's dev team. I nodded. Mind if I borrow it for a sec? She blinked. Excuse me? I held her gaze, firm, unflinching. The crowd around us kept talking. No one noticed the shift in tone. Not yet. Chloe, I said quietly, you're trying to use credentials you didn't earn. To control a system you don't understand. That ends now. Her face changed. Just for a moment. Then she laughed, loud enough for those nearby to hear. Rebecca, she said brightly, we all know you've had a hard time adjusting to civilian life. If you're feeling paranoid, I can connect you with one of our agency counselors. PTSD is... You forged my credentials. I interrupted. Voice flat. Used my ghost alias. Activated a live shadow node with direct Merlin access. Jason blinked. Chloe leaned forward. And you have no proof, she whispered. I smiled. Actually, I do. Melissa stepped from behind the catering tent, tablet in hand. She tapped once. Behind Chloe, on the big screen looping reunion photos. The feed cut. replaced by code, encryption trees, access logs, overlay IDs, and at the bottom, Merlin breach origin, DOJ West, C. access forged. Gasps. Murmurs. Someone dropped a fork. Jason stepped back. Chloe's hand shot toward her watch. I was faster. I grabbed her wrist, yanked the band off, and held it up. Protocol override, I said. Cole E5 shut down. The screen blinked. Then connection terminated. I turned to face her. You don't get to steal what you couldn't carry. Next, I pulled the plug, but Chloe doesn't lose that easily, and Merlin might not be the only ghost she's awakened. The screen behind us went black. Just silence. No jazz, no brunch chatter, no Chloe's perfectly rehearsed monologue. For the first time since the reunion started, she wasn't controlling the room. I let the moment hang, let it weigh. Let them all feel what I'd carried for 2 decades, the crushing invisibility, the humiliation dressed in silk and wine, the mockery delivered with a smile. Except now, the roles had reversed, and Chloe knew it. Her face was locked in a smile too wide to be real. Her eyes flicked from me to Melissa to the stunned crowd around her. Jason had already backed away, unsure whether to run or just pretend he'd never been part of this power couple storyline. You're out of your mind, Chloe said through clenched teeth. Stepping closer to me. I held her watch up again, now disconnected. You used my clearance. You risked a critical breach. You turned my entire identity into a career move. That's ridiculous, she snapped. You think anyone here is going to believe some disgruntled vet over the deputy director of... I don't need them to believe me. I nodded toward Melissa, who had begun transmitting the digital trail live to the DOJ internal review channel. I just need them to believe the data. Melissa tapped her tablet again. Already pinged oversight. Evidence chain is sealed. Time-stamped. Encrypted under Protocol Avalon. Chloe blanched. That word Avalon meant the investigation had already passed her pay grade. And mine. She tried to pivot. You've always hated me. Rebecca, this whole thing, this is just personal. You couldn't stand that I finally made something of myself. No, I said calmly. I couldn't stand that you were willing to burn everything down just to stand in the spotlight, even if the stage wasn't yours. A voice crackled from Melissa's earpiece. She nodded slightly. They're coming, she whispered. But Chloe wasn't done. You think this will end with some grand reveal? She hissed, stepping even closer now, voice low. You think this will erase everything I've built? No, I said, but it'll remind people what integrity looks like, even if they forgot. She stared at me, breathing hard now. And for the first time, I saw it past the polished speeches and curated image. Fear. Not fear of being caught. Fear of not existing without the lie. That was her weakness. Not power hunger. Identity dependence. She needed this version of herself the way others need oxygen. And I had just cut the line. Then, like clockwork, a black SUV rolled up on the far edge of the lawn. 2 federal agents stepped out in plain suits. Sunglasses. Serious jaws. Chloe's spine stiffened. She turned toward the crowd, voice raised again this time to plead her case. I don't know what this is, but it's clearly a mistake. Some kind of stunt, maybe political, maybe personal, but... She didn't get to finish. The agents reached her and gently but firmly asked her to step aside. I'm the victim here, she insisted. She's been unstable for years. Ask anyone. Jason, tell them. Jason froze. A man very good at playing both sides, suddenly finding himself with no sides left. Jason, she snapped. Say something. He swallowed. I didn't know anything about this. He said, I thought the app stuff was... You said it was simulated testing. Her face cracked. That was the first fracture, and it spread fast. In the chaos. Someone bumped into me. Not hard, but intentional. It was Mr. Walters. He slipped something into my hand. A folded sheet of paper. I looked down. Typed text. Printed last night. DOJ internal memo. At the top, Merlin. Phase 2, candidate review. Underlined Rebecca Cole. Recommend activation pending oversight. I looked up. He was already walking away. The man who once taught me the ethics of revolutions had just slipped me a key to one. Melissa leaned in, voice low. She wanted your past, but they want your future. I blinked, stunned. What? She didn't just steal your clearance. She redirected it. They thought you were testing new layers of Merlin. They've been watching your ghost alias run patterns for months. And they liked what they saw. The precision, the restraint, the integrity. But I didn't do any of that, I said. Melissa gave a small, knowing smile. Exactly. Which meant everything Chloe had used to frame herself as the architect of success had, unknowingly, been feeding back into my legacy. Her counterfeit moves had reinforced my reputation. Her theft had become my testimony. And then, as I stood there, stunned, the second SUV rolled up. Not federal. Private. From the front seat stepped a woman in a navy suit. Older, commanding, no name tag, no smile. Mrs. Cole, she asked. I turned. Yes. I'd like to speak with you. Off-site. Melissa's eyes met mine. That was it. The call. Not just to end Chloe's game, but to begin mine. I gave one last look at the scene. Chloe being escorted inside, guests whispering, Jason shrinking, the stage she built dismantled in an hour. And I walked away. Toward the future she tried to forge in my name. Toward a mission I didn't ask for, but now fully owned. Next, they thought I was the ghost. But ghosts don't just haunt, they watch. And now, I was watching them. The SUV moved in silence. Not a word spoken in the first 5 minutes. Just the soft hum of tires slicing through asphalt, and the occasional static from the driver's radio. The woman sitting beside me still hadn't introduced herself. She didn't need to. Her presence alone carried the weight of 1,000 sealed files and a dozen need-to-know-only missions. Her posture was military, but her eyes, those were something else. The kind that had watched more people fail than succeed. The kind that cataloged weakness faster than a biometric scan. You already know who I am, I said. A small nod. We do. And this ride is evaluation. I glanced out the tinted window. Trees blurred past. Farther out now, we were leaving the resort's radius. Isolation by design. Merlin was never your concern, she said finally. Tell that to Chloe. We will. The corner of my mouth lifted. She's still talking. She's still spinning, but the logs speak louder, and her team's already started distancing. I exhaled. So what now? We have a problem, she said, and an opportunity. That's how they always started. A problem and an opportunity. Classic intel phrasing. Just vague enough to keep you guessing. Just loaded enough to make you wonder if your life's about to change forever. You remember Phase 2, she asked? I nodded. Reactive AI. Distributed defense logic. Minimal human override. Merlin Phase 1 was predictive intelligence. Passive. Watchful. Phase 2. That was action, execution, autonomy. The system didn't just gather intelligence. It made decisions. And those decisions had real-world consequences, shutting down comms, freezing accounts, even triggering non-lethal drone protocols. Someone tried to fast-track it. She said, off-grid, using your credentials. Chloe. She wasn't alone. I turned to her fully. Who else? Someone inside DOJ West, still unidentified, possibly tied to a private contractor with foreign interests. The old nausea returned. Cold, familiar.
Let me guess. I said, they plan to let Merlin spin just long enough to extract key algorithms, then kill the process and blame a rogue agent.
She didn't answer. She didn't need to. We both knew how this worked. I looked down at my hands. They felt foreign now. Not the hands of someone who came to a high school reunion to forget the past, but of someone who was being pulled back into it, piece by piece. Why me? I asked. Why bring me in now?
She studied me for a moment, then reached into the seat pouch and pulled out a folder. Thick, crisp edges, my name printed in bold on the cover.
Inside transcripts, mission logs, citations, but also recent assessments, surveillance snapshots from just weeks ago. You've been under observation, she said. For what? For integrity under pressure. I almost laughed. That's a dying metric these days. Exactly, she replied, which is why it matters more than ever. She turned fully now. Rebecca, we don't need someone who wants power. We need someone who's walked away from it and still knows how to wield it when it counts. I said nothing. She opened the final page of the folder and slid it over to me. Temporary reinstatement, level Echo 5 Prime, shadow clearance, no official trail. My throat tightened. I hadn't seen that clearance level since Berlin, since the night I broke protocol to save a child instead of completing a directive. You want me to go dark. We want you to go visible, but silent. Let the world see you in the room. Let them guess what you know. That alone might be enough to smoke out the rest. I stared out the window again. Aspen Grove was gone now. Just hills, forests, fog. All the things I used to chase, trying to outrun the version of me I thought I had to be. But now, I wasn't running anymore. I was returning. Not to prove myself, but to protect the thing I still believed in. That truth doesn't need a stage to matter. It just needs one person brave enough to speak it. I reached into my pocket and touched the charm Melissa gave me, the USB key disguised as jewelry. Still warm. Still real. That, I decided, would be my symbol now. A reminder that even pretty things could carry deadly truths. The SUV pulled into a quiet compound, private tarmac, a jet waiting. The woman handed me a secure phone. You'll fly out within the hour. Your contact in Warsaw will brief you on the rest. She paused. One more thing, she added. Your sister. What about her? She's offered a deal. Of course she had. Conditional immunity. In exchange for naming the remaining contractors and providing access to her private servers. I clenched my jaw. She always knew how to pivot when the spotlight shifted. She also mentioned one thing, something strange. What? The woman looked at me carefully. She said, You can take my career, Rebecca, but you'll never take back what Dad left me. I froze. The air shifted. That phrase, it wasn't random. It was code. Something only we would understand. Years ago, after our father's funeral, Chloe had taken one thing no one noticed, a wooden box from his study, marked Confidential Jefferson High Project, Avalon Origin. And just like that, everything clicked. This wasn't about Merlin. It never was. That was just the surface play. The real game, the deeper breach, was buried in whatever that box held. Something tied to our father's past, to his connection with early defense mapping, to a project codenamed Avalon. Which meant Chloe might not have been the architect of betrayal. She might have been continuing someone else's design. Next, if Avalon still exists, then Chloe's not the final boss, and I'm not done fighting. Warsaw. Cold air, bleached skies, buildings built like chess pieces, angular, calculated, brutal in their logic. I stepped off the jet and into a wind that cut through the coat like glass. Somewhere beneath the surface of this city, secrets that outlived governments still whispered their names. I wasn't here for closure. I was here for the origin. Avalon. My father had spoken of it once. Late night. After one of his whiskey and truth moods, he said, "The most dangerous systems aren't ones we lose control of. They're the ones we build thinking we never could." I thought it was metaphor, a warning about ego. Turns out, he meant literal systems, early neural mapping tech, designed to predict destabilization patterns. Avalon was a seed. Merlin was the tree. And Chloe. She hadn't planted anything. She'd inherited it. Inside a nondescript bunker outside the city, I was led to a secured room, clean, steel-tiled, humming with chilled server racks. My new handler, a lean woman named Soren, handed me a black envelope. "From the DOJ archive," she said, "pulled from your father's sealed box. Chloe never decrypted it. She didn't have the clearance." I opened it. Inside blueprints, not for weapons, for simulations. Behavioral algorithms paired with decision triggers, dated over 2 decades ago. The title at the top made my blood chill. AVALON, Adaptive Virtual Architecture for Logic Overriding Networks. It wasn't just predictive. It was programmable morality. You feed it enough scenarios, and it begins making ethical decisions on behalf of the user. No wonder Chloe wanted it. She wasn't trying to control systems. She was trying to rewrite what they believed was ethical, starting with her version of reality, her version of power, her version of me. I traced my father's initials at the bottom of the blueprint, and next to them, one I didn't expect. CC. Chloe's handwriting. Sloppier, younger, but clear. She wasn't just the heir to his secrets. She'd helped him build them. Suddenly, her obsession made sense. It wasn't ambition, it was legacy. My father had built the system with both of us, only he erased my part from the narrative when I chose to serve on the ground. Not behind a screen. Chloe stayed, and he trusted her. Until something changed. There was one final document beneath the schematics. A letter. Unsent. Typed. "Rebecca, if you're reading this, it means you came back when no one else would. You always saw things others didn't, not just data, but people. That's why I buried your version of Avalon. Not because it wasn't valuable, but because it was dangerous in the right hands. And Chloe, she's always needed to be right. You just needed to be true. I'm sorry I didn't choose better, but I hope you do." My chest tightened. Years of silence unraveled in a single paragraph. The old betrayal took on new meaning. My invisibility in the family wasn't because I was weak. It was because I was stronger than they could control. I closed the folder. Burned every trace digitally. Handed the physical documents back to Soren. She nodded. Understood. Nothing from that room would leave except what I carried in memory. And choice. We drove back in silence. By dusk, I was standing in a secure conference room in D.C., staring at a screen. Chloe's face, grainy, streaming from a holding cell. She looked tired, almost small. "They gave me 10 years, she said flatly. "You got off light. They want me to consult, use Avalon to help plug holes in Merlin. They still think I'm useful." "You always were," I said. "Just not trusted." She scoffed. "And you think you are?" "No," I said, "but I'm not afraid of being invisible anymore." Her eyes narrowed. "You're going to bury it, aren't you? The whole thing." "I'm going to lock it so deep, even the bones forget it existed." She leaned in, lips curling. "You think you're fixing something, but all you're doing is delaying the inevitable. Systems evolve. Avalon will rise again, with or without us." "Maybe," I said, "but this time, it won't be built on stolen names." I ended the call. Silence returned. Weeks passed. The DOJ offered me full reinstatement. I declined. Instead, I joined an advisory board, unpaid, unofficial, invisible, a ghost in the corner of the room, watching where no one thought to look. Melissa called once a week. She was working on an ethics curriculum for future recruits. Said she wanted to name one of the principles the Cole Doctrine. I told her to call it something less dramatic. Mr. Walters sent a card. No words inside, just a sketch of a rook chess piece. Solid, steady, unmoved. At night, I sometimes opened the USB charm.
Not to access files,
but to remember. Not just what Chloe did, but what I chose to do in response. Not revenge. Correction. Not retribution. Realignment. That's what this story was. Not a takedown. A recalibration of power. One built not on visibility, but value.
If you made it this far, thank you.
Not just for listening, but for witnessing. Because in a world obsessed with louder, faster, shinier, sometimes, the quietest story, the one no one believed you'd tell, is the one that saves the next soul from getting erased. And maybe you felt like that. Invisible, replaced, forgotten. Let this be your reminder. You don't have to be seen to matter. You don't have to be loud to lead. And you never, ever need permission to reclaim your name. Now it's your turn. Have you ever had someone try to rewrite your story? Leave a comment. Share this with the friend who always carried more than they let on. And if you haven't already, subscribe. Because sometimes, the quiet ones are the ones rewriting the world. Story 2. My name is Evelyn Walsh. I'm 36 years old, and I just inherited a rusted-out 1982 Dodge pickup truck. That's it. That's all. No lake house in Maine. No equity portfolio. No trust fund. No vintage wine collection. No leather-bound letters from generations past. Just a barn key. A name scratched on a legal document. And an old truck that barely starts. They got the mansion. I got metal flaking off the hood and a half-dead engine. But here's the thing, I still think I won. Let me back up. The last time I spoke to my grandfather, he held my hand a second longer than usual. He was frail, but his eyes were clear steel gray, like a storm in a suit. He said just one thing before I left for Frankfurt. Some things don't belong in the will. Some things are meant to be found. I didn't understand it then, not fully, but I do now. 3 weeks ago, I was scrubbing blood off my boots in a Croatian safe house, yes, literal blood. And no, not mine, when my encrypted line buzzed. A message from my mother. Camille, come home, urgent family matter. No warmth, no punctuation. Just 12 cold-blooded words in courier font. I landed back in Vermont under gray skies and stale grief. The air outside the estate was crisp with early fall, the trees glowing red and gold like they were trying to distract me from the rot inside. The family lawyer, George Tierney, was already sweating when I walked into the study. The place hadn't changed mahogany walls, fireplace crackling politely, scent of cedar and varnish once a comfort, now a casket. Camille sat in her favorite velvet armchair like she was posing for a portrait, legs crossed, lips painted in the color of control. Jason, my uncle, leaned against the hearth like he owned the damn place, hand tucked into his blazer pocket like he was waiting to close a business deal. Dad didn't even look up. I didn't take off my jacket. I didn't unpack. I hadn't come for pleasantries. George cleared his throat. His voice cracked once, then steadied, as per the final legally binding version of the will, dated July of this year. My spine straightened. I caught the shift in Camille's breathing when he said her name. She already knew. Of course she knew. She probably helped write it. The estate, including the lakefront property in Maine and this residence, shall be transferred to Camille Walsh. She exhaled like someone tasting victory for the third time, still pretending to savor it. And to Jason Walsh, the entire equity portfolio and all long-term holdings in Walsh Enterprises. Jason smiled, smug, slow. My fingers twitched. I wanted to snap his sunglasses in half. And to Douglas Walsh, George continued, the family boat and associated marine investments, including the Newport mooring rights.
Dad gave a short nod, his hands folded in his lap like a man who had already surrendered. Still didn't meet my eyes.
I waited, not out of hope, just to hear it out loud. George hesitated.
And to Evelyn Walsh.
A pause, a tightening in the room.
The 1982 Dodge pickup truck currently parked in the barn.
Silence. You know the kind of silence that hums behind your teeth. That's what this was. Jason chuckled under his breath. Guess Grandpa wanted you to drive off quietly. I didn't respond. I simply stood up, tucked the barn key into my pocket, and walked out. Camille watched me. I could feel it, like a scalpel tracing the edge of my shoulder blades. Mom still refused to look at me.
George mumbled something about needing signatures, but I was already halfway down the hall. Outside, the September air slapped me in the face. It was cold enough to sting, but I welcomed it. Anything to break the numbness. Gravel crunched under my boots as I followed the old path to the barn. The trees stood like witnesses, leaves bleeding gold and scarlet onto the driveway. The barn door creaked like it hadn't been touched in years. Dust hung in the air like ash, and there it was under a sagging tarp, half swallowed by shadow and time. The truck looked worse than I remembered. Rust bloomed across the hood like a skin disease. One side mirror hung by a thread, tires deflated, almost sunk into the floor. But I didn't care about any of that. I opened the driver's door. It groaned like it recognized me and resented it. The leather seat cracked beneath my weight. The smell inside was uncanny. Old oil, cold metal, and something faintly citrus, my grandfather's aftershave. The kind he never changed, even when everything else around him did. I sat for a second, no movement, no sound. Then I reached for the glove compartment. It took a good yank, but it popped open. Inside was a single envelope, yellowed with age, no seal, just 3 words written in that familiar sharp, slanted handwriting. Not for them. My breath hitched. I opened it carefully, like it might disintegrate if I moved too fast. A photograph slipped out. Me, maybe 8 years old, grinning with 2 missing teeth. I was in overalls, holding a fishing pole I clearly couldn't handle. Grandpa stood beside me, both hands raised with a trout the size of my torso. His other hand rested on my shoulder. Taped to the back of the photo, a small silver USB drive. No label, no brand, no hint. I stared at it, pulse rising in my throat. Most people inherit stocks, or paintings, or land. I inherited a message, a trail, a test. And that rusted truck, maybe it wasn't an insult. Maybe it was an opening move. You want to know what was on that USB? Trust me, you do. But I didn't open it. Not yet. Not there. Because something about that truck, the smell, the silence. The envelope told me if I was going to find the truth, I had to do it far away from here. And before Camille came looking, the cabin sat 30 miles out of town, just beyond a crooked bend in the highway and hidden by a wall of trembling birch trees. It was small, a 1-story structure that creaked in the wind and smelled faintly of pine sap and old books. There was no Wi-Fi, no television, no prying eyes. Exactly what I needed. I dropped my duffel by the door, locked it behind me, and pulled the curtains tight. The air was cool inside, thin, quiet, and honest. I set the photograph down on the side table next to the Laban Yes. The compass, the one Grandpa gave me when I was 10. He'd told me, even when people lie, true north won't. I hadn't thought about that line in over a decade. The USB was still in my hand. It felt heavier now, like it had gained weight since I found it. Or maybe that was just the burden of knowing, of remembering that nothing Grandpa ever did was by accident.
I plugged it into my laptop and waited. 3 files appeared. Simple names, no drama. Trust v1.pdf. Cyprus Holdings. DSX. Cam.meeting 22 MP3. I froze. That last one Cam meeting felt like a punch. Camille. Of course. She never could resist tying her name to everything she touched. My pulse ticked up, the kind of pulse I used to get behind enemy lines. When a building looked too quiet, or a hallway had too few shadows, that whisper that said, "This is not just paper. This is power."
I clicked the PDF first. It was encrypted, not just password protected, but ciphered, a language within a language.
I smiled. Grandpa and I used to do this code games when I was a kid, while other girls were having sleepovers. I was sitting in a dark den with red string, a decoder wheel, and a bowl of popcorn. This encryption, it was visionaire with substitution, easy to anyone with patience and muscle memory. Line by line, I worked through it. The document was dry at first: asset transfers, legal phrases, layers of trust language, but then names, dates, wire transactions to banks in Cyprus, the Caymans, Zurich, and buried near the bottom a clause titled Silent Compensation Third-Party Directive. Jason Walsh, $2.4 million wired. Douglas Walsh, $1.6 million in offshore dividends. Camille Walsh, unspecified disbursement with override authorization. My name wasn't listed, not once. This wasn't a will. It was a blueprint. They hadn't inherited the fortune. They'd orchestrated it. I leaned back. My fingertips were cold. The Laban glinted in the lamplight beside me. I reached over and held it. The needle trembled, then steadied. North. Always north. I opened the Excel file next. Dozens of tabs. Shell corporations, cross-account redirections, LLCs with dead-end mailing addresses. It wasn't just money laundering. It was precision, layers designed to confuse even federal auditors. This wasn't just betrayal. It was premeditated erasure. A carefully constructed effort to make me disappear from the family on paper and in principle. Then I played the audio. Static, at first. Then Grandpa's voice dry, slightly hoarse, but unmistakably lucid. "No," I said. "No, Camille. This isn't what I signed. I'm not changing the will just because you promised him some vacation property." Then, a loud click. Silence. End of file. My stomach flipped. They'd cornered him. Camille had manipulated him. Or worse, someone forged a revision and paid to make it stick. Either way, Grandpa had tried to fight it, and now he was dead. I sat for a long time. No tears. Just stillness. Rage doesn't always shout, it simmers. It compresses. Then it calculates. There was no doubt anymore they'd erased me. But Grandpa, he left the tools to undo it. Suddenly, headlights swept across the cabin window. I ducked. A car, black, parked halfway up the gravel path. Someone sat inside for a long beat, then backed out slowly and disappeared into the trees. I didn't recognize the vehicle, but I knew the feeling. Camille had sent someone, maybe not to threaten, but to remind. "We see you." I shut the laptop. My hand gripped the compass tighter. There were things I'd learned overseas: how to vanish, how to plant, how to listen between words. But the most important, how to wait until the right moment to strike. And this was just the beginning. I opened a burner email and typed one name. Max Rivera. Max wasn't just an old contact. He was a digital ghost, a former NSA cryptanalyst turned independent contractor. We'd worked together in Prague, under fog and bullets, where you didn't know who was watching, but you knew someone was. I wrote 3 lines. "Max, it's Evelyn. I need a silent trace. High-level estate manipulation. Federal reach. Files attached. Do not reply. Attach the 3 files. Encrypted again. Burn the link after upload. Then I sat there, breathing shallow, watching the Elabon's needle as it trembled again. I thought about the mansion, about Camille sipping Cabernet, Jason flipping through investment reports, Douglas pretending not to notice. I wondered if they had any idea what Grandpa had really left me. They had the house, I had the proof. Now I just needed a plan. But first, I needed to know what Max would say, and whether he would even dare to respond. The message from Max came 6 hours later. Encrypted. Burned after opening. 3 words only. This goes deep. I read it twice, then a 3rd time. My fingers hovered above the keys, but I didn't reply. Not yet. I knew Max, he didn't use language like that lightly. If he said it went deep, then I was dealing with more than a forged will. More than a betrayal. This was a crime. The kind of crime that wears a smile at brunch and donates to charities in crisp checks with gold letterheads. The kind that hides behind generational wealth and politely corrupted lawyers. The kind of crime only people like them could get away with. Unless someone like me decided otherwise. The next morning, a text from Camille arrived. Dinner tonight, 7 p.m., family only. No smiley face, no apology, just a command dressed as courtesy. It was like she wanted me back under the chandelier, seated next to the men who erased me. Wanted to pretend we were a family again, except this time I was a ghost haunting their banquet. I didn't respond, but at 6:45 I was in the driveway. The house loomed above me, same as it always had, white shutters, brick arches, ivy like veins curling across the west side. You'd never know, driving past. That inside were people who'd sold out blood for equity shares. As I walked in, I could smell the old kitchen thyme, garlic, roasted lamb. My stomach turned, but not from hunger. Camille greeted me with a smile made of marble. "Evelyn," she said, arms outstretched like she hadn't gutted my legacy 2 days earlier. "I'm glad you came." I didn't hug her, just nodded once. "What's this about?" She tilted her head, amused. "Oh, come on. You've been away so long. Let's just eat. Talk like normal people." Normal. Jason poured wine at the table like a sommelier on cable TV, still drinking Merlot. Evie. "I drink answers," I said, "but wine will do for now." Douglas didn't speak. He was halfway through his salad, focused solely on the plate like it held the secrets of the universe. Maybe guilt made his appetite nervous. I sat. Not because I wanted to, but because sometimes you learn more from staying in the lion's den than walking away from it. Dinner was a pantomime. Camille bragged about the local charity gala she'd now inherited the chair role for. Jason slipped in mentions of real estate acquisitions. Dad talked taxes. But no one mentioned the will. Until I did. I put my fork down slowly. Just curious. When exactly did Grandpa decide to change the will? The clinking stopped. Jason froze mid-chew. Camille took a sip of wine. Months ago. It was his choice. "Interesting," I said, "because I have a recording of him saying otherwise." She blinked. It was quick, barely a twitch, but it was there. Jason coughed into his napkin. Douglas stood up and left the table without a word. Camille leaned forward, voice soft. "What exactly do you think you have, Evelyn?" "I don't think. I know. And more importantly so will Max Rivera." Jason stood suddenly. "You brought in Rivera. Are you insane?" Camille gave him a quick, sharp look. "Shut up" was written all over it. I stood too. My hand went instinctively to the compass in my coat pocket. I felt the smooth brass, the calm tick of the needle finding north. It grounded me. "You erased me," I said. "But Grandpa knew you would. That's why he didn't leave me money, he left me proof." I walked out before they could respond. Outside, the wind had picked up. Leaves whipped around my boots. For a second, I felt something sharp in my throat, not sadness. Not yet, but something that smelled like it. I drove back to the cabin in silence. No music, just the hum of the engine and the steady, mechanical breath of the night. Inside, the lamp flickered once before warming the room. I sat down at the desk, opened my laptop, and clicked the secure channel Max had set up. He was already waiting. "Evelyn," he said, his face pixelated, but his voice was clear, calm.
"What did you find?" I asked.
"A lot. Offshore laundering, signature mismatches. Your mother filed a power of attorney override the same week your grandfather fell into what the hospital calls unexpected neurological decline." I swallowed. She drugged him. "I can't say that, but I can say a nurse at his assisted care facility filed an anonymous complaint 3 days before he passed." I sat back. My stomach dropped, then tightened.
"They buried it," I said.
"Not yet, but if we push too fast, they'll make it disappear." "So what do we do?" Max leaned forward. "We build pressure. Strategic, quiet. No courtroom yet, just heat. Get them to sweat. And when one of them breaks, we go public." My compass sat beside me. I flipped it open. North. Again. I nodded. "Start with Jason. He's the weak link." Max smiled. "Already working on it."
As the call ended, I leaned back in the chair.
The rage inside me wasn't hot. It was cold, focused, sharp. I reached for the photo Grandpa had left the one of me, holding the trout, toothless grin, sun in my eyes.
"You left me nothing," I whispered. "And somehow, you left me everything."
But I wasn't the only one planning a move that night. Back at the estate, someone else had opened their own laptop. And their screen. It showed my name, in red. The next morning, I woke to a knock. 3 sharp taps, not frantic, not hesitant, just deliberate. I paused, one hand on the compass beside the bed. The needle pointed north, as always, but my instincts buzzed south. I moved slowly, slid my Glock from beneath the floorboard, and approached the door. It was Jason, wearing a Barber jacket over a collared shirt, trying his best to look relaxed, like he'd just swung by with croissants and small talk. I cracked the door. "You lost, Jason." He raised his hands. "Can we talk?" I didn't move. About what, offshore fraud or forged signatures? He gave a tight smile. "I'm not like them." That was his opening line. Bold, stupid. I let him in, but kept the pistol close. Inside, he scanned the cabin. "Nice place. Rustic. Very off-grid. You always liked hiding, huh?" I motioned to the table. "Start talking." He sat, fiddled with the sleeve button on his shirt. That was his tell. He used to do it before lying to Grandpa, too. I didn't know how far Camille would go. He said, "The will. The nurse." I thought she was bluffing.
"You took money," I snapped. $2.4 million. That's not innocent."
Jason looked at me, really looked, and for a second, I saw something behind his eyes. Not guilt, but fear. She said if I didn't sign, she'd cut me out completely. Said it was either side with her or get steamrolled. You've seen what she's capable of. "You think this is absolution?" I asked. "You want to flip now because the feds are sniffing around." "I want to survive," he said, "and I think you do too." I leaned forward. "Then give me something real." Jason exhaled slowly. "There's a second recording." My blood froze. "She didn't delete the original," he said. "She just edited what got passed to the lawyer. The full audio, it's on her private drive. The iPad she carries everywhere. It's synced." I sat back. Thoughts racing. Camille's iPad. She guarded it like a vault. Always locked. Always near. But accessible. Jason leaned in. "If you can get into it, everything changes." "And what do you get?" "Immunity. I testify, help the investigation, and walk away with whatever they let me keep. I laughed once, bitter. You're still negotiating. He shrugged. That's what I do. I didn't trust him. Not really. But I trusted that he feared Camille more than he feared me, and that was leverage. So I nodded. We do this my way. That night, the Walsh estate glowed under a full moon. The charity gala Camille had been planning for months was finally here, hundreds of donors in suits and silk, sipping wine under golden chandeliers. The entire property had been transformed. Valets, red carpet, jazz quartet by the fountain, cameras everywhere, but none pointed inside. Camille, of course, was radiant, wearing navy silk, diamond earrings, and that ever-present smirk, and yes, tucked under her arm, the iPad. I watched from the hedges behind the east wing. Max was in position on the network, Jason inside, playing his part, nervous, but motivated. The plan was risky, stupid, but it was the only shot I had. At 9:13 p.m., Jason texted. She left it in the guest room, 3rd floor, door unlocked. You've got 10 mins. I slipped through the kitchen door, dressed like a server, black on black, head down. I moved fast, up the staff staircase, every step echoing like a heartbeat in my throat. 3rd floor, guest wing, quiet. The guest room smelled like roses and money. The iPad was on the desk. Charging, unlocked. My breath caught. I plugged in a wireless sniffer. Max would mirror the data from the cabin. I couldn't risk downloading too slow, but a clean copy would let us analyze everything: emails, recordings, encrypted folders. The LA ban in my pocket felt warm. Even though I knew that wasn't possible, just my body reacting, adrenaline, focus. Then I heard it heels in the hallway. Too early. I yanked the sniffer, tucked it in my sleeve, and slid into the closet. The door opened. Camille entered, alone. She moved to the desk, humming slightly, opened a drawer, took out something: papers, maybe. Then she paused, looked around, turned toward the closet. I held my breath. But then she smiled. To no one, to herself, and said, "You always were 2 steps behind, Evelyn." Then left. I waited 5 seconds, 10, then slipped out and bolted. At the edge of the property, I ripped the earpiece back in. Max's voice, got it all, full system mirror, including a folder labeled Waltz Final, Evelyn. That second audio, you were right. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Play it, I whispered. And what we heard changed everything. You promised me. Camille, I said no. No changes. You hear me? I won't sign it, and I sure as hell won't let you. Voice overlapping. If you don't, I'll make sure Evelyn never sees a cent. She's not part of this family anymore. Then a sharp sound, a crash, shuffling, and silence. Jason had been wrong. It wasn't just manipulation. It was threatening a dying man. I stared out into the trees, the moonlight slicing through the leaves like a blade. They took everything. But now I had a weapon. And I wasn't done yet, because what Camille didn't know was that someone else had been recording, too. Jason wasn't the only one with something to lose. 2 hours after Max decrypted Camille's private folder, another file appeared in the mirrored system, hidden, locked behind layers of decoys, mislabeled as charity contacts, XLS. But Max didn't get fooled by naming tricks. Inside was a screen recording, 47 minutes long, dated 3 weeks before Grandpa's death. It started with Camille, pacing. In her study, lights low, wine in hand. Then, Douglas appeared. That's what shattered everything I thought I knew. He wasn't quiet out of guilt. He was quiet because he was in on it. Camille poured 2 glasses, passed one to him. "You're sure Jason will sign?" "He's too dumb not to," Douglas replied. "But Evelyn, she's the wild card." Camille smirked. "She'll be gone by the time the ink dries." I stopped the video. My fingers clenched around the compass. The brass edges dug into my palm like teeth. The needle spun once, then steadied. North. Still north. Max was silent on the line, watching me. Then I asked, flatly, "Can we leak it?" He nodded. "Absolutely. But if you want impact, we do it in person, public, something they can't spin or bury." I knew just the place. Walsh Industries was hosting its annual shareholder event the next morning. One of those lavish, overstuffed affairs at the downtown Boston Hilton. Camille would be speaking. Jason and Douglas seated at the VIP table, playing their perfect family card in front of investors, press, and legacy-hungry board members. I knew the security, knew the format, knew where the projector was wired, knew how to hijack the feed without leaving fingerprints. It was time. Max would trigger the playback. My job was simpler: walk in, stay calm, and watch the world flip upside down. But before I left the cabin, I did one thing. I placed the photo me and Grandpa fishing on the table, beside the compass. A private ritual, my own benediction. "Time to finish this," I said aloud. The Hilton buzzed with ambition, tense smiles, crisp suits, monogrammed coffee cups, a symphony of small talk and silent power. I wore black, not to blend in, but because mourning deserves armor. At exactly 10:17 a.m., Camille took the stage. Spotlight followed her like it had her whole life. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, voice silk, smile polished, "it is my honor to carry my father's vision into the next generation." Applause. Cameras flashed. I stood near the back, invisible, watching the countdown on my burner phone. 3, 2, 1. The screen behind Camille blinked. Her smile faltered. Instead of a pie chart or family legacy reel, a new video began. She turned. The blood drained from her face. On the giant LED display, her own voice played. "If you don't, I'll make sure Evelyn never sees a cent. She's not part of this family anymore." Gasps filled the room. Phones rose like a forest. Then came Douglas's voice. "Jason's too dumb to notice. Evelyn's the problem. Get her out of the picture." The room erupted. Jason stood up too late. His face went pale as paper. Camille turned back to the crowd. "This is doctored. None of this." Then the screen split. Time-stamped logs, bank records, wire transfers. Max had built the timeline perfectly bulletproof, brutal, and impossible to deny. I stepped forward. "Not doctored," I said, voice steady, just finally visible. Dozens of heads turned, flashbulbs, whispers. Camille stared at me like she'd seen a ghost. "Evelyn," she breathed. "You forgot something," I said, holding up the compass. "He didn't leave me a fortune. He left me a map." Security moved toward me, but stopped. One glance from the board chair was enough. Camille's mask cracked. She stepped off the stage, heels loud, voice shaking now, not with grief, but with fury. "You think this makes you right?" "No," I said. "I was already right. This just makes it public." Jason sat frozen. Douglas slunk out the side exit like a man trying to erase himself. And Camille? Camille was still staring, but this time, it was with something new. Not hatred, not power, but fear. But what I didn't know, what none of us knew, was that one final move was already in play. Someone else had just filed a lawsuit. Someone I hadn't even considered a threat. Until now. The press had barely caught its breath when the new storm hit. That evening, after the boardroom takedown, I was back at the cabin. The adrenaline had faded, replaced by a strange silence, a vacuum after the punch lands. I should have felt relief, satisfaction, vindication. Instead, I felt unfinished. Like I'd kicked open a locked door and walked into a room full of mirrors, only to realize one of the reflections wasn't mine. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. One message. "You're not the only one he left instructions for. We need to talk. Now." Attached a PDF titled Memo Got to Emily.pdf. Emily. My mother. The one person I thought had died a decade ago. I stared at the name for a full minute, the word impossible looping through my brain. Then I clicked. The memo was dated 4 weeks before Grandpa's death. Handwritten, scanned, real. If anything happens to me, Emily knows where to find the ledger. Do not trust Camille. Evelyn must never know unless Emily does first. Tell her I kept my word. Ledger. Emily alive. My stomach flipped. I called Max. "She's dead?" I said, pacing. "No," Max replied. "We did a sweep. No death certificate filed in her name. Not in the U.S., not even overseas. It's like she disappeared on purpose." I stopped cold. "You're saying she faked her death?" "I'm saying," Max said, "you're not the only Walsh who vanished for survival." He sent coordinates. Vermont, remote, private. A burner mailbox registered to Elena Wright, just similar enough to make my heart race. I packed that night. Took the compass. Left the photo. 3 hours of winding roads later. I pulled up to a run-down farmhouse tucked into the valley like it was hiding from history. No lights, no motion. But the second I stepped onto the porch, the door opened. She looked older, of course. Gray hair, lined face, but those eyes steel blue, same as mine. Emily. Alive. She didn't say my name, just opened her arms. I didn't cry. I didn't move for 10 full seconds. Then I broke. When we sat. She poured tea like it was 2003 and I was a teenager again. The world hadn't changed. But we had hardened, hollowed, rebuilt. "You knew everything I asked." Voice hoarse. She nodded once. "I warned your grandfather, years ago. But I couldn't stop them from circling, especially Camille." "Why fake your death?" Her jaw tensed, "Because they were going to ruin both of us. Your father already tried. Camille finished the job." "You left me," I said, flat, quiet. "I did," she admitted, "to keep you from getting pulled into something I couldn't protect you from. But he never gave up on you, and neither did I." We sat in silence. Then she stood, walked to the back closet, and pulled out an old leather-bound book. The ledger. It wasn't just financials. It was everything. Bribes, lawyers, family secrets, the kind that collapse legacies, the kind Camille had killed to bury. And at the end, a single note in Grandpa's handwriting. "If Evelyn is reading this, she's earned the truth. The bloodline ends with her on her terms." I felt my throat close. "You were his daughter too," I said to Emily. She shook her head. "He always knew you were the better one." Suddenly, everything made sense. Camille had forged the will to protect their stolen kingdom, but Grandpa had scattered his truth between ghosts, me, Max, and Emily. A trinity of scorched names. "I'm going public," I said, with all of it. Emily didn't argue. She just handed me a flash drive. "Then you'll need this." "What is it?" She looked me in the eye. "The final confession. One Grandpa recorded himself. It's never been opened." My fingers curled around it like it was sacred. And in that moment, I felt it. The past wasn't chasing me anymore. I was dragging it into the light. But just as I stepped outside to call Max, my car was gone. In its place, a note, taped to the mailbox. Block letters, sharp, printed. "Final move isn't yours." I spun. No lights, no sound, just stars blinking overhead like they couldn't bear to watch. Who took the car? How much had they seen? And what were they going to do with it? Part of me thought it was Camille, but part of me knew someone else had waited in the dark far too long. And now they were ready to strike. By the time I reached the main road, the car was long gone. No tire tracks, no broken branches. Whoever took it knew this land knew me enough to cover their trail. Vermont woods swallowed everything whole after dark. No use chasing shadows. But they'd made one mistake. They left the note. Final move isn't yours. Typed, anonymous, confident. But desperation always shows its fingerprints. And I knew just who had motive, means and arrogance to think they still had control of the board. Camille. Except this wasn't her style. Camille would have staged it bigger. Legal papers, lawyers, public humiliation. This was personal, which meant only one person. Douglas. The quiet one. The one who never spoke because he didn't have to. I'd underestimated him from the beginning. Thinking silence meant submission. Turns out he was just waiting. Waiting until everyone else burned out, so he could walk through the ashes untouched. I drove Emily's truck back to Boston. Max stayed on the line, patching into satellite cams and toll logs, and at 1:42 a.m., he pinged the plates on my missing car. Douglas's lake house. Off-grid, private dock, no cameras. But we didn't need cameras. We had a plan. Max called in a favor an old contact at the Boston Globe, investigative reporter named Sonia Tron. She'd been hunting corruption cases for years, and she owed Max a debt from a whistleblower case in Detroit. I met her outside the lake house just after dawn. She stepped out of her Prius with a thermos in one hand and a camera bag slung over her shoulder. "You're the famous Evelyn," she said. I nodded. "You ready?" She smirked. "Born ready. Let's end a dynasty." Douglas's house was still, but not empty. The moment I walked in, I saw him, sitting by the fireplace, my car keys dangling from one hand, a glass of bourbon in the other. "Evelyn," he said, like we were old friends sharing breakfast. I was wondering how long it'd take. "You should have run," I said. He smiled. "I still might. I have everything. Grandpa's final recording, the ledger, your voice, your fingerprints. Camille flipped on you. By the way, said you forged the medical order to sedate him before the will was changed." His jaw twitched, just slightly, but enough. He stood. "You think truth matters?" he asked. "You think courts care about morality when everyone in that room's got a private yacht and an offshore trust? I think people care, and you're about to find out how loud the truth can be when it's public." I tossed the flash drive onto the table between us. He looked at it. "You don't have the nerve," he said. "You always were Grandpa's little project. Sentimental, emotional." "You're right," I said. "But that's exactly why I'm not playing your game." From behind me, Sonia stepped forward, camera rolling. Douglas's eyes widened. "You're being recorded," I said. "Live, streamed. You try to leave, try to lie, even move wrong. It'll go viral in seconds. This isn't the courtroom. It's the court of public opinion." He looked between us, me, calm and steady, Sonia, unmoving. Then he sat back down and laughed. A long, hollow laugh that echoed in the stone walls. "You want me to confess?" I shook my head. "I want you to watch it end." That night, Sonia's article dropped. Front page. Headline bold. The Walsh family conspiracy forgery, fraud, and a final confession. Within hours, it was everywhere. Reddit, Twitter, cable news. Camille's board seat was revoked. Jason went into protective custody. Douglas, arrested before noon. They tried to deny it, to rewrite the story. But Grandpa's voice, steady, tired, honest, played on every news outlet in America. They want my money, but Evelyn understands what matters. She'll make sure this name doesn't rot.
And I did.
I didn't keep the company, didn't touch the fortune.
I dissolved it.
Every stolen asset returned, every shady shell company dismantled. Half the proceeds went to whistleblower protection groups, the other half, scholarships, for women like me cut out, cut off, and cut down. Emily and I never lived together again, but we spoke weekly. Sometimes we sat in silence. Sometimes we just listened to the wind, shared old memories of Grandpa's voice, his compass. That compass stayed on my desk. It didn't point to money. It didn't point to revenge. It pointed north.
To truth.
And that was enough. Even now, people ask, was it worth it? The family, the legacy, the blood on my hands. And I tell them, no justice ever comes clean. But it comes if you fight for it. So if you're watching this, wondering whether to speak up, whether to risk it all for the truth, just know they only win if we stay quiet. And I don't stay quiet anymore. If this story hit you, like, share, and comment I don't stay quiet below. Let's keep breaking the silence for justice, for legacy, for truth.